Welcome back to another Legend 3245 video. Today we are doing something a bit different. Last time when we were talking about a player profile, we were talking about Patrick Laine and why he has failed to succeed on his high expectations of being the next Ovechkin. Today we're going to talk about why Jack Hughes' rookie season wasn't actually as bad as you might think. Alright, so Jack Hughes, taken number 1 overall in the previous... taken number 1 overall in 2019. He had high expectations because he was very speedy, he had good puck handling skills, he was going to be a great playmaker, and people had high expectations. So, why did his rookie season actually be so bad in terms of just the points? Because he had the worst ever rookie season for a number 1 overall pick, in this modern era NHL since he had the worst rookie season for a number 1 overall pick ever since like a long time ago. Even Kale Yakupov, who, as you might remember, is one of the biggest busts of all time, in his rookie season, he had 31 points in 48 games. So, why are people labeling Jack Hughes already a bust, and why I think his rookie season wasn't actually as bad as people might think. So, you have to acknowledge that every team who has a number 1 overall pick sucks, usually, because the number 1 overall pick usually goes to among the worst teams of the NHL. But in Jack Hughes' case, he maybe had even the worst brunt of it, because the 2019 New Jersey Devils were absolutely, and I mean absolutely horrendous. So, the New Jersey Devils here, in 2019, they were one of the worst teams I think we've seen in recent history. Because in 2019, their highest scorer was Kyle Palmieri with only a staggering 45 points. They traded Taylor Hall before the trade deadline, so that doesn't count. So, can you tell me, when your leading scorer is a 45-point season, then what do you expect out of a rookie that isn't even supposed to be your star yet? What do you expect out of Jack Hughes, who had to combat this horrendous situation, right? Because the thing is that Jack Hughes scored 21 points in 60 games, and you would think, hey, that's horrendous. But consider the fact how special of a season this was. Because there was no original season. Jack Hughes, he missed a couple of games, and of course the whole COVID situation before entering the bubble, but New Jersey was already eliminated. So, what does this lead me to? Jack Hughes with a 21-point season minus 26. Now, yes, that was the worst minus in the Devils. But this Devils team, their whole team was minuses. I mean, when you see Taylor Hall having a minus 11 in his 30 games played at the trade deadline, then you just see how horrendous this Devils team was. That leads me to my second point about how Jack Hughes is a short player. So Jack Hughes is 5'10". We all know that. But do you know that all of the people since Patrick Kane have not been as short as Jack Hughes? And of course, not everyone's a Patrick Kane. But in the history of NHL, the short people have to make adjustments because they're not used to the NHL. And you can see that now because this season, Jack Hughes has been terrific in his limited games played. He has 8 points in 9 games played, and that's almost a point per game pace. Now, I'm not saying that this will keep up by any means, but you gotta acknowledge that for short players, they take a while to adjust to the NHL lines. Because in the history of the NHL, ever since Jack Hughes, 5'10", no short player has been drafted since Patrick Kane with the same height of 5'10". But let's look at some of the shorter players, some of the guys below 6 feet, and you will see Nail Yakupov, 5'11", regarded as the biggest bust of this decade. And then you go back down. Patrick Kane is the next guy under 6 feet here. And then Sidney Crosby. But these people are once-in-a-generation talents. What about some of the guys if you go back to the previous history? 5'11", Wendell Clark. Now, Wendell Clark had a terrific career by most means, but he didn't live up to his first overall selection. He had 564 points in 793 games, and in his first season, he had 45 points. That isn't anything special per se. And if you go even more back, Del Harchuk, now of course he was a legend with 1,409 points in 1,018 games. But the fact of the matter is that not many people below 6 feet have ever been drafted into the NHL. And that shows you just how peculiar Jack Hughes' situation here. If we go back to Rijan Hool, who had 408 points in 634 games. Again, nothing special. Only 19 points in his rookie season. And you see, again, that actually short players do tend to take a while to adjust to the NHL. Or how about Michael Plasse? Now, of course, he was a goalie, so it's pretty unfair to compare. But he had a 3.79 GAA, an 881 save percentage. So you see, short players actually don't tend to do that great. Other than a few exceptions. And Claude Gauthier, who was another 5'10" pick, right? Claude Gauthier. He didn't even make the NHL as a first overall pick. And so you see that rookies do take some time. Even a lot of rookies above 5 feet. Nico Hischier, also regarded as a bust so far, and he had 52 points in his first season. Right? But then he's dropped to 36 points. you see that actually, when you look at it, Jack Hughes, for the team he was playing on, the New Jersey Devils, he really didn't do that bad. Especially considering he had a whole another 20 games. He had 21 points in 60 games. That's a pace of 29 points in an 82-game season. But, have I told you that a guy like Jack Hughes, a 5'10 player, by the end of his season, he was actually adjusting pretty well. Like, he was, he did pretty well towards the end of the season. He wasn't as bad as the start of the season then. Because you gotta understand that, like, Jack Hughes actually was pretty good. And, like, you see that Jack Hughes is a hard-working player. He had a long off-season, he had a chip on his shoulder, and he transformed his game. He now has 8 points in 9 games. But let's also talk about some analysis here. So, I've already talked to you about why 2 of the reasons why the Devils are horrendous and why that makes sense, and also why he was in a COVID situation. Now, let's also talk about another reason. For most of the number 1 overall picks, they usually have at least a couple of older players to help them out, to help them adjust to the NHL. And we see this in the NHL, right? We see that usually they have these mentors, and basically the mentors mentor the younger guys. That's their whole role. That's exactly what has happened with many, many, many overall picks. Because let's look again at that first overall pick list, and you see that Lafreniere, he has Artemi Panarin, he has Mika Zibanejad, he has Chris Kreider, he has some players that can help him out. Rasmus Dahlin, he has a guy like Rasmus Ristolainen to help him. He has Jack Eichel to help him. He has some, like, he used to have Zach Bogosian to help him. Sort of these guys who have played more than him to at least mentor him a little bit. Let's look at how young that New Jersey Devils team really was in 2019. Because when you look at the New Jersey Devils in 2019, then you see they had no valuable veteran presence. Like, okay, sure, they had Kyle Palmieri, but he was never a good scorer in the first place, and he's only 28. And the Devils have not had playoff experience in a long, long time. Nikita Gusev, 27. Again, not much. Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, Pavel Zacha, 21, 21, 22. Blake Coleman is a depth player, 28. Dimon Severson is still a new player, 25. Travis Zajac is easily like their only veteran presence on the forwards. And that means, what did Jack Hughes have to learn from? He had to learn himself. He had to go through the battles himself. Because this New Jersey team was very young. And there was no veteran presence that could really help him out to step into his own game. So then, what has changed in Jack Hughes' game this season? Well, you might remember, last season, he was trying to make a lot of beats, and he was trying to get around things, because that's his only thing. Puck handling is what allows him to, like, go over players and get into the offensive zone where he can do his best to make moves and do playmaking